That's all this campaign has been, is spin, 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 spin. And it's going to come home to roost. You want to know what Democrats think about stay-at-home moms? All you got to do is go back and remember what Mrs. Clinton said in the 1992 campaign. Something along the lines of, what do you think, I'm going to stay home and bake cookies? Make no mistake about it, my friends, these people are who they are. And one of the things they are is governed by a militant feminism. And Teresa Heinz Kerry fully buys into it. Go back to her acceptance speech at the Democratic Convention. It was all about her. If you listen to that speech, you would get the idea she's the first woman that's ever been given the right to vote, the first woman that's ever been given a chance to speak at a Democratic convention. Excuse us, old Barbara Jordan. It made it about her. She felt so proud to be a woman that night. I'm telling you, my friends, these, and you liberal, well, you may know who these people are. You may be the same type for all I know, but you average Democrats out there, you have no clue who these people really are. Think they're on your side? If you knew what they really think of you, if you knew, why is it they only go to the Pancake House once a year in Iowa? Because that's where you are. Why do they only go duck hunting with other Democrat officials? Because they don't want to go with real hunters. Everything is phony. Everything is spin. Everything's a photo op. And it's all designed to fool people. There's no authenticity with these people. There's no genuineness from these people. There's nothing these days but rage and hatred and anger. There is no optimism. There doesn't even appear to be any appreciation for the greatness of this country and its potential. There's only doom and gloom in their future as they look forward. How can anybody want to associate with this? How can anybody? I've never known a crowd to gather. Well, that's not true. I have known lots of crowds to gather around a bunch of negative nabobs. There's something about negativism. It's much easier than being positive, and there are a bunch of losers in life who will rather hear other people blamed for their problems than facing their own. I'll tell you, it becomes a head-scratcher to try to figure out how in the world reasonable people, knowing 1/10 of what there is to know about John Kerry, would even consider voting for this guy. And I'm going to tell you what, I don't think most people are voting for this guy, period. They're voting for as a Democrat on the ballot. They're voting because he's a Democrat on the ballot and because they are irrational in their hatred for Bush. And Kerry just happens to be their vessel. Well, the more he's out there on TV, I think the more harm he does to himself, dressed up as Elmer Fudd, or however he chooses to spin his. And the Democrats even said, yeah, we want to let everybody know that he's a guy, he's a real guy. It's sort of what they say about hookers. Everybody knows what a hooker is. The only question is the price. If you have to go out there and say, I'm not a whore, you're pretty much saying you're a whore. If you have to go out there and say, I'm a regular guy, there must be some question about it. Imagine having to go prove you're a regular guy. It must be tough when you've married two wealthy women, you've never had a job outside the government payroll, and you go windsurfing, your family has 5 SUVs in one house, and you claim you don't own any of them. It must be tough to prove you're a real guy. You can boss Secret Service agents around. That makes you feel tough, I guess. You take a spill down the ski slope in February or March, and the press jokes with you about it, and you say, I don't fall, that SOB, pointing to the man assigned to protect his life, Secret Service agent, that SOB tricked me, you saw it. What kind of guy is this? Guy who never makes mistakes? Guy who never says what he said? Guy who never meant what he meant? A guy who never felt what he felt? Who is this guy? Why does he want to be president? Still hasn't answered these questions. Because he wants to do things smarter in a more effective way? Then who? How? Is it smarter and more effective for U.S. soldiers to die under the banner of the UN? Is it smarter and more effective for U.S. soldiers to be drawn forward into an international criminal court, to be tried as war criminals because a bunch of Europeans don't like them? Is that smarter and more effective? Is it smarter and more effective to trust and believe communists and dictators and thugs when they make nuclear deals with you and then be surprised later to learn they broke the promise? Is that smarter and more effective? Is it smarter and more effective to wage a 30, 40-year war against poverty and not reduce it? Is that smarter and more effective? Is it smarter and more effective to raise taxes on everybody and cause an economic slowdown? Is that smarter and effective? What in the world is smarter and more effective about any aspect of liberalism? Zilch. Zero. Nada. There's not one thing smart about it, particularly in today's country or today's climate. Today's liberalism portends nothing but danger and ominous tones for our future, should they totally gain power back. There's nothing smarter or more effective about it, and there never has been. And the truth about that is slowly but surely effervescing and bubbling to the top, soon to be boiling over. In fact, I think it is visible to many and many. The number of people who actually willing to call themselves liberals in this country is dwindling, particularly those who seek national office. John Edwards won't admit to it. John Kerry won't admit to it. They run from the label. And when they seek election, what do? They want to convince conservatives that they're real guys. Hard to do that when you sit in front of a mirror for 10 minutes primping your hair, Senator Edwards. Sorry, Senator Edwards, real guys don't care that much about their hair. You wash it, you comb it, and you leave and go about your business. Let's never mind the hypocrisy that the sick and convalescing but getting stronger every day. Bill Clinton gets a flu shot, but for some reason, Dick Cheney gets called on the carpet for having one himself. I thought these were people of compassion who wanted the sick and the ailing, like Bill Clinton, to have flu shots. It's okay for liberal elitists to get flu shots. They're important people. Not for anybody else, folks. I want to get back to this theme that Kerry, in order to win, is having to act like a conservative. He's out there duck hunting today in full camouflage gear, and he's out there talking about God. So he's talking about guns, and he's talking about God. Howard Dean warned him back in November 2003 and December of 2003. That would be during the early stages of the Democratic primary. Here's a montage of Howard Dean warning Democrats what they'd better stay away from.
We have got to stop having our elections in the South based on guns, God, and gays.
Why can't we talk about jobs, health care, and education, which is what we all have in common, instead of allowing the Republicans to consistently divide us by talking about guns, God, gays, and all this controversial social stuff that we're not going to come to an agreement on.
Okay, so Howard Dean's recipe, stop talking about guns, gods, gays, and all this controversial social stuff. We have a montage here of John Kerry violating Howard Dean's rules.
We're all God's children. They felt God had made them. I believe that choice is between a woman, God. As I said, I grew up a Catholic. I was an altar boy. There's a great passage of the Bible. But I know this. God's work must truly be our own. He just said that freedom is a gift from the Almighty. Everything is a gift from the Almighty. And as I measure the words of the Bible, the greatest commandments are love the Lord your God, and with faith in God, and God bless the United States of America.
Now, Howard Dean has a point. These are generally losing issues for Democrats. And if Kerry's base were fully fired up, he wouldn't be doing this. There's something odd about all that. And then to add to it, as I mentioned last hour, in Xenia, Ohio yesterday, Kerry said, I will bring my faith with me to the White House and it will guide me. The left is having conniption fits because they think that's what Bush is doing. I hate to tell you this, but George Soros gave $18.5 million to Kerry precisely because he doesn't like Bush and his Christianity. And talking about George Soros is probably making phone calls to the Kerry campaign saying, I hope you're lying about this. I hope you don't really mean this. And a lot of the leftists, what is this? He's just going to be separation of church and state. Where are you separatists these days that reside on the left? Your candidate is talking about taking God in. Pat Robertson never even went this far. When he was a presidential candidate, he said God told him to run, but he never said he's going to take God in the Oval Office with him. John Kerry just did. I will bring my faith with me to the White House and it'll guide me. Now, wait, he has an out. He could be talking about faith and Lenin. But I think he meant God. So he's out there talking about God, and now here he is. We've got him talking about gays, this is the second rule of Howard Dean's that Kerry violates.
I think if you were to talk to Dick Cheney's daughter, who is a lesbian, she would tell you that she's being who she was. She's being who she was born as. I think if you talk to anybody, it's not choice.
You want to get to the real point here about talking about gays, though? Let's talk about gay marriage. The homosexual community in this country is predominantly supporting of Democrat candidates. Very, very, and especially the militant and wealthy gays in this country, very avid contributors to the Democrat cause. But their party will not come out for gay marriage. Wonder why? Wonder why? Has to come out and camouflage not for gay civil unions and so forth, but I believe marriage between a man and a woman. And then he calls Mary Cheney a lesbian. Now, it seems to me if this country were as rabidly liberal as the left thinks it is, he would be out there championing gay marriage, because the majority of people in this country being liberal would be for it. It seems to me that if this country were as liberal as it is, John Kerry would not be going hunting and killing an innocent goose that did nothing but fly above him, and then have some sycophant walking alongside him, carry it around by the neck, dead, for the whole world to see, proving what a tough, real guy John Kerry is. If this country were as liberal as they think it is, he wouldn't dare do this. It would offend the liberals in this country, and he certainly wouldn't be talking about God. He wouldn't be promising to take his faith into the Oval Office and be guided by it. What is John Kerry having to do here, folks? In the last 2 weeks prior to Election Day, what does he have to do to win this election? He has to convince conservatives that he's not a liberal. He's not out trying to fire up his base. He's not out doing that at all because there aren't enough of them to carry him to victory. He can get 100% of his base. This is one of the big myths that the media has put forth in this whole election year. He can get 100% of his base, and it's still not enough to count on. He's losing support in the black community. He's losing support in the Jewish community. He's losing support in the seasoned citizen community who voted in large numbers in Florida for Bush in 2000 because they're tired of hearing this same old threat about Social Security. They know it's a lie. It doesn't happen. Social Security doesn't get cut. Their checks never get stopped. They only get bigger. What they're doing is listening to what John Kerry say he'll do to defend the country, and it isn't much. He'll turn it over to the United Nations, a global test. He still doesn't get that Iraq and the war on terror are the same issue. He still wants to separate the two. Anybody with half a brain knows Iraq and the war on terror are the same issue, especially since Zarqawi now has officially aligned himself with Al-Qaeda. You know, there's an interesting juxtaposition here that you can make about Kerry's issue. Kerry sits there and says that we have, because of Bush's incompetence, turned Iraq into a terrorist breeding ground, right? And he says this is bad. Well, if Bush and his incompetence has turned Iraq into a terrorist breeding ground, doesn't it make Iraq the forefront of the war on terror? It does. And furthermore, doesn't it also mean that the terrorists are too preoccupied with us there than to attack us here? Hasn't it all along been sensible to coalesce and congregate all the terrorists in one spot? And they may be flooding into Iraq because they know how crucial it is. They're fighting to the death to defend Iraq because if Iraq goes, they lose big. It's a brilliant move to have this all happening in Iraq instead of here. So Kerry, on the one hand, tries to say it's incompetence on Bush's part that we have caused all this new terrorism and turned Iraq into a terrorist breeding ground, when, according to Michael Moore, it was nothing more than a happy-go-lucky bunch of people flying kites before we got there. And now it's just horrible. It is the center front on the war on terror, and the terrorists are so occupied with us there, they don't have the resources nor the ability to hit us here as they did on 9/11. It's a paramount, profound success, Senator Kerry. And more people begin to see this. And what will you do, sir? Well, you'll find a way to get us out of there as quick as we can in a way that causes us to lose it and lose face, and thereby expand their momentum and their confidence that they can hit us again, and that we won't do much about it once you're in the White House, sir. You got to go out, though, and still make people think you're a tough guy. You're a conservative. You're a real guy. Well, you better get John Edwards away from that mirror and the hairspray for 10 minutes at a time. And you better do more to learn how to put on some camouflage gear, carry a shotgun, claim to shoot a duck while somebody else is carrying it around for you. Kerry actually said he was too lazy to carry it himself. He was up late watching the Red Sox. One more soundbite here. In fact, two more. Here he is, the third debate, talking more about guns.
I believe it was a failure of presidential leadership not to reauthorize the assault weapons ban. I'm a hunter. I'm a gun owner. I've been a hunter since I was a kid, 12, 13 years old. And I respect the Second Amendment, and I will not tamper with the Second Amendment.
You realize what heresy that is to a genuine liberal? Second Amendment to American liberals shouldn't be there. The Second Amendment should not be in the Constitution. The Constitution's a living, breathing document, according to the left. It bends and shapes to form whatever perversions our society and culture takes to accommodate them. And the Second Amendment, why the Founding Fathers, had they known about bowling for Columbine, why they would have never written that. John Kerry's view of the Constitution is, had we known what was going to happen when we wrote it, we wouldn't have written it. It's the way he looks at the war. Had we known that we were going to lose, we shouldn't have started. Had we known it was going to go bad a couple days, we shouldn't have been there. Bush lied. Well, in the meantime, the American left thinks that the Second Amendment shouldn't be there at all. Here's John Kerry swearing allegiance to it. You tell me that this is a majority liberal country. There's no way. Hell's bells, folks. Big-time progress is being made when the number one liberal in the U.S. Senate has to get elected by telling people and convincing conservatives he's one of them. He cannot get elected by showing everybody how liberal he is. He cannot get elected by rallying all of his base behind him and having them all vote for him, because even if he does, it ain't enough. He has to go siphon conservative votes. He has to go get some religious conservatives. He has to go get some NRA conservatives. He has to go get any number of conservatives he can anywhere, real guy conservatives, whoever they are. They failed, I guess, with the NASCAR dads campaign. But they made a go of that. They tried that. Here's one more Kerry soundbite. Let's go back to 1993. He's on CNN again with Frank Sesno. And the question from Sesno. Senator Kerry, how about a big tax on guns if you're not going to go along with a big tax on bullets?
I think you ought to tax all ammunition more. Personally, I think you ought to tax guns.
John Kerry in 1993. Tax guns, tax all ammo more, tax everything more, raise everybody's taxes except mine. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a question. I haven't been able to follow the news other than with the sound down since the program began. Does anybody know whether Senator Kerry suffered any shrapnel wounds today when he was out there hunting geese in Ohio? If somebody knows that, I'd love to know if he has any shrapnel wounds to report. I know you don't get medals for this, and we might not know otherwise, but if anybody has any clue, I'd like to know. Now, I also want this to, I have a question about this. Kerry says that he's going to take his faith with him to the White House and that his faith will guide him. Well, Senator Kerry has been a senator for 20 years. And before that, he was lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, both times on a government payroll. What I want to know is this. Did Senator Kerry bring his faith to those positions? If he did, you cannot tell. Did his faith tell him to support partial birth abortion over and over? Did his faith tell him to vote against the military? Did his faith tell him to raise taxes on Social Security recipients? Did his faith tell him that he needed to cut the U.S. defense budget and the intelligence budget? Did his faith tell him to vote against the Gulf War in 1991? Where is the evidence that Senator Kerry took his faith with him to the office of the Senate or his lieutenant governorship position in Massachusetts? The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is not Senator Kerry bringing his faith to the White House. It's his extreme liberalism and that crazy oddball wife of his that he's going to be bringing to the White House. That's what we don't want in the White House. We don't want his extreme ultra-liberalism, and we don't want that fringe kookball as his wife in the Oval Office herself. He can bring his faith anywhere else he wants to go, but his faith is liberalism, folks, and make no mistake about it. And that's what we don't want in the Oval Office.